Good evening, everyone. Uh, this week, week four, moving a little further, we're going to pick up on some of the things we've talked about in previous weeks regarding overall communication and audiences and soft skills to discuss the actual writing process and what goes into it. The business writing process, as we say. Key thing is when the business writing process is not just necessarily about, in my opinion anyway, writing and sitting down and typing out a letter, but I always like to say we write when we speak. We write when we compose a couple of thoughts about what we're going to express to a friend or a colleague about a situation that exists. And so when you think of business writing, think not only of just sitting down with a pen and a paper or sitting down at your laptop, but other situations where words are in play. So it's important when you are writing to know when you are most productive. Uh, to be productive, you should be alert. It says here ready to work, but again, we aren't always writing when we're sitting at a computer. We're writing as we speak. The ability to concentrate is important, especially when it comes to writing, expressing your thoughts. I always tell students to not, if you can avoid it, working and writing late at night, for most of us, because our minds aren't as sharp. We need sleep. We might be upset about something that happened during the day. So often writing includes starting with critically thinking, uh, being self-directed in your thoughts, uh, thinking about where we start from, and there are established standards in critical thinking, and you have to be willing to address and acknowledge our own tendencies toward bias and those sorts of things. Effort and persistence come into play typically in critical thinking, especially when it's a more detailed thing. That should be pointed out. Uh, a lot of business communication doesn't require high detail or uh, attention to things like communication bias or egocentrism. But when you're making a larger presentation and addressing a larger audience, working on a mass communication program, uh, things like these and sociocentrism will come into play. Important to overcome our fear of writing. Uh, this is something that everybody has. I've been a writer for a long time. It was my primary profession, and I I don't know if I have a fear, but sometimes I have a reluctance to sit down and just do it. Uh, and having a negative orientation isn't good. I had a boss once who just said, just write something. In other words, write the wrong thing first and then go from there. Revise it, think it through, think of the impact on the audience, and that sort of thing, which just do something, I guess, is the point he was making. Uh, Let go of your desire for perfection. People oftentimes think when they're writing they have to suddenly become as articulate as a famous poet or Shakespeare or Walt Whitman or Hemingway. No, you just need to communicate clearly to someone else who has the same interest, business desire, a customer, potential customer. Uh, they want something, you want something. Uh, this will be happening every day in business, whether you are on the kind of a consumer selling end of things or whether you're a back office person. So consider those. Clarity and concision are important in business writing. Oftentimes we talk about things like executive summaries and highlighting things using boldface headings, informative headings. Basically, if you're just listing things, use things like bullets or numbers. You can go through serial questions, things like that. Conclusions, yeah, generally, even when whether you're talking about a long document or maybe just a short email, think of it as starting with a attention statement and then maybe leaving it with some kind of conclusion or start. I mean, it all follows a kind of common paradigm or paradigms, and we see those in some of the things that are brought up in the text. An introduction, a relationship somehow to the audience or to the individual, a recognition perhaps after that's been established of a need or common interest or a problem that needs to be solved, your opinion or your thoughts or your recommendation, perhaps bringing in some other considerations, but then you want to get to a conclusion. There's a term used a lot in many areas of communication called call to action. What do you want them to do? In other words, you don't leave them, a reader, whether it's the reader of an email or somebody who's listened to you talk, to think about, well, what do I do to help the person or aid the person or move the process forward? Be somewhat clear in terms of what you want to achieve. In business writing, which this is brought up in the text and doesn't factor in a lot. I can't remember many day-to-day business communications through my career where I've been asked to give sources, but people wanted me to be right. And this is the case too. So always know how you know what you know. Whether it's using APA style in a paper to your professor or later on down the road in a long memo to your boss where you name providers or clients or specific people there or what their opinion is. Be sure you have background. Obviously, things like patch writing and plagiarism, those are things that to get into at a little different level. Patch writing is when you basically copy something and then you go change it around a little bit. In other words, you might not be borrowing someone's exact words, but you're taking all their thought and mixing it around using synonyms and rearranging. That's still kind of using thinking that's not yours. Plagiarism is more when you take what they've done exactly and use it exactly as it's been said by them. Confirm, compile, confirm, and state things like results and information you've gleaned. Be careful about managing your time. There's a certain amount of things that go into what we call writing or composition. Some of it's explained here. You will find other documents and ways of going at this. There's this concept in communication, especially persuasive communication, known as rhetoric, and what it involves are three basic elements: ethics, logic, and emotion, known here and spelled out here as ethos, logos, and pathos. This descends down to us from the Greeks, and it's pretty universal when you think of persuasive communication. All persuasive communication has elements of these three, maybe some to a lesser degree. Ethos is the view of the communicator's ethics. Logos is your logical argument. facts, statistics, clear, direct information. And pathos is the emotional element. In business communication, in my mind, you're going to lean a little more heavily toward logos, ethos maybe. Emotion comes more into play in consumer aspects like consumer advertising, product advertising directed at consumers, and those sorts of things. But all three still are present in persuasive communications. Other things to bring into that come into play in writing are things like a purpose and a thesis statement. I'm sure you guys have gone through these in kind of language courses and either English or high school English, those sorts of things. You organize, you outline, you don't transition abruptly, you do it smoothly. You know all of that. And there are guidelines for that, for all of this in chapter 3, chapter 4. Logic and credibility, important, and passions can be important too. Follow the rules, make it easy to read, make it impactful to the reader. That's hard to do sometimes. You have to think of ways to appeal to the reader. A provocative subject line or headline, something that relates to the reader in particular or as a member of a close-knit group. Obviously noted here are being clear and concise, and make sure you are efficient and effective. A little more on rhetoric here. We talked about logos, which I always connect with logic because the LOG. Ethos to me connects with ethics and credibility because of the ETH. And I always personally connect pathos to emotion because emotion is related to modern English words like empathy and sympathy, showing emotion, compassion in modern English words. Or pathetic means basically you evoke emotion somehow with whatever sadness. Emotion, pathos aren't necessarily connected to being sad. I mean, humor is an emotion. Excitement is an emotion. So keep those things in mind. We're talking here about colloquialism, casualism, formal writing, and those sorts of things. The type of style you depends on here, or you use, depends on your audience, whether your communication is going to be internal or external, the purpose of your document. It's hard to envision sometimes, but there are so many degrees of these things where your messaging and your readers or your recipients' interpretation of them vary based on the need, the timing, the purpose, the context. Formal versus informal. We talk about tone and voice, direct and indirect introductions, and those sorts of things. Proving your point. There are some things here with proving your point involves preparing your audience to consider your argument, providing necessary background, communicating your claim, introducing it, offering evidence to support your claim, offers the audience things that discount or refute your counter arguments. And then you have to be prepared, especially if you have a very specific point, to address those. And then your conclusion or your argument. All of this is not unlike what we have looked at with our outlining for our 3-minute speech. So different format. I think there are 6 points here, but all of these follow kind of a model or a paradigm of how they should be done. The point, proving your point, also considers various elements like your claim, what you believe is true, your supporting reasons for the claim, your data or your background information or testimony from people. It's a kind of a bit oversimplified in the book. And then your warrant. You create a connection between the claim and supporting reasons. And proving your point also includes this long, drawn out thing. And as I say this and show you this, it's important to say that you shouldn't get overly hung up in this, but you should see commonalities between the various models that we show, that we've talked about here last week, and will come up again, where simple communications is basically guided by the point you want to make and who you want to make the point to, the support you have for your point or your argument. I never like the term argument, but and you got to think of an argument in a more benign way too. And so this is used as a way to express the levels of impact that certain things that can come up. So argument by generalization all the way through argument by testimony don't mean arguing, really. They mean your factual basis. And I think that's kind of important to point out at this juncture. Evidence. What evidence do you have? Kind of a logos kind of a point of view from earlier couple points back. Appealing to emotion. Yeah, emotion comes into play in business communication as much as it does in consumer communication. So, writing and liability. Writing, this is more about writing than it is about liability, but a little bit of that creeps into things. Choose words that can be easily understood. Don't use overly fancy language, or we talked about this last week, jargon is appropriate, technical jargon especially is appropriate with certain audiences, but totally wrong for other audiences. Learn the rules governing words. Yes, okay, that's important. Promote understanding and limit misinterpretation. And know that what you write and how you write it can be part of a company's success, but can also expose it to unintended legal consequences and responsibility. Take that with somewhat of a grain of salt. So I worked in numerous different companies and doing writing for them, but my writing also represented many more clients. So a lot when certain things that were going to be made public needed to be communicated, they were shared with the company's legal department. So you will have some guardrails, but it's probably best to think about these things as we write too. Don't worry about necessarily getting sued, especially in internal communication where you're just trying to get work done. So anyway, key tips though, pay attention to details, understand the target meaning not only what you want to say, but your audience, who you're talking to. Your target here can be one person, or it can be a group of people in a kind of in a group project email. When you're speaking in person, consider the nonverbal aspects of the message. Review, reflect, and revise. And from my own experience, don't, especially when you're concerned or angry about something, Don't type something up late at night and just immediately hit send. Maybe wait until the next morning. So that's this week's chat. And check forums for your assignment for completing class for the 5th of February. You'll get it. You'll get both a pass and as a pass-fail small assignment, and you'll get credit for attendance when you do that. Thank you very much. See you next week on the 12th.